Do you feel like you're too late to Bitcoin? It honestly surprises me when I hear people say that, but maybe that's just because I know some things that you don't. So today we're going to be diving into the data behind how should we view and come to the conclusion of if we are early to Bitcoin still or if we're too late. I'm Mitch. I'm the founder of Strong Wealth, a wealth management firm for Bitcoiners. And today we're going to answer the question, am I too late to Bitcoin? So when most people try to figure out if they're too late or they're early to an investment, they look at the price alone. So if we look at Bitcoin's price here, I've got the chart pulled up. Current Bitcoin price is $97,067. Most people see this and they're like, man, that seems pretty high. $97,000 just for one Bitcoin. But we can't just look at price alone and make this decision. That's a horribly short sighted way to go about making this determination of whether you're actually early or late. One thing you must also look at is market cap. So let's take a look at these couple stocks here. We have Amazon, and I'll show you Tesla here in just a second. So Amazon currently price per share is $189. If we look at Tesla, price per share is $284. So if we were only to look at price alone and we looked at these companies, we'd be like, well, Amazon, I'm earlier to Amazon than I am to Tesla. But is that really true? I don't think it is. So if we look at Amazon, the other thing we should be looking at is market cap. All right. So this is the total size of the company. So it's price per share, $189, times the number of shares outstanding, which arrives at a market cap of $2 trillion. So that gives us an idea of the size, the total size of this company or size of this asset. If we compare that to Tesla, though, even though the price per share is higher, the market cap is 931 billion. So Tesla is less than half the size of Amazon currently. But if we were to try to make the decision of which one we're earlier to based on price alone, we would decide to invest in Amazon over Tesla, which is completely not true because Tesla is less than half the size of Amazon. So you're probably asking yourself, well, what is the market cap of Bitcoin then? With a current market price of $97,000 per one Bitcoin, what is the total market cap of Bitcoin? So this is a chart here that I recently found from River. It's comparing the top global assets. And as you can see, Bitcoin's current market cap is around 1.86 trillion as compared to Google, Silver, Nvidia, Microsoft, Apple, gold, etc. This is a little bit outdated list, or Amazon would be on there as well. As we just saw, it's a $2 trillion market cap. But the point is, we have a Bitcoin market cap of 1.8 trillion currently, and gold stands up there at the top at 22 trillion. So Bitcoin is less than a tenth of the size of gold currently, and still worth less in total than a few of the largest companies in the world. So if we were just to look at this chart alone, we could compare Bitcoin to gold and be like, well, gold's at a $22 trillion market cap. Bitcoin stands at 1.86. If we just look at it that simply, Bitcoin still has good room to grow to become the same size as gold, which I believe is very possible and very likely. Because if we compare gold as a store of value asset to Bitcoin and the properties that it has makes it a much better asset than gold, a large improvement on what gold tried to be historically. But in addition to market cap, we must also consider the total addressable market of any asset when we're looking at the market cap and thinking about how much room that actually has to grow. All right, so if we go back to Tesla for this example, Tesla's at a $931 billion market cap currently. But we want to try to understand, well, how big could that market cap actually get? Well, we need to think about the total addressable market to understand how much they could actually grow. So for Tesla, for example, we would look at the car market and we'd be like, okay, what share of the car market does Tesla have right now? And how much do we reasonably expect that they could grow to? That would help us get an idea for how big Tesla's market cap could actually get over time compared to where it is today. Now, that's a very simple way to look at it, but it's important to look at the total addressable market when considering how big an asset or a company could actually get or how much room they still have to grow over time. Well, what about Bitcoin's total addressable market then? Well, we can look at this really two different ways. We could look at Bitcoin as money or a monetary system, and we compare it to other currencies around the world, or we could look at Bitcoin as a store of value asset and compare it to the market caps of other store of value assets globally. So, first, let's look at this chart from River. This is a report that they put out talking about Bitcoin adoption. They put this out at the beginning of the year, so it could be a little bit outdated, and you can find this on their website if you want to look at it for yourself. But first, let's just compare Bitcoin then. If we're looking at it from the lens of money in a monetary network, let's look at Bitcoin compared to the other currencies around the world. All right, so Bitcoin currently stands around a $1.9 trillion market cap versus the other currencies at the highest with the Chinese yuan at 43.1 trillion, US dollar 21.7 trillion, and so on, which would put Bitcoin at the 11th largest currency in the world right now. Now, what if we viewed Bitcoin from a store of value lens rather than a monetary network lens? So we compared Bitcoin's current market cap to other store of value assets and their market cap globally. Well, you can find that here on this chart in this River report as well. So total global wealth right now, $900 trillion. And this really is just an estimate. It's hard to get very specific around what the total global wealth is currently, but this is a good estimate. So real estate, $330 trillion, bonds, $300 trillion, money, $120 trillion, equities, $115 trillion, and then we have art and gold at 18 and 16 respectively. This is a little bit outdated. Gold with the recent run up is around $22 trillion currently, but this still allows us to arrive at the point that we want to get to. All right, so Bitcoin currently stands at a $2 trillion market cap. As you can see here, it's this tiny little square down here in the bottom right compared to these much larger squares in these other store of value assets that people are using to store their wealth in and grow it over time. If we translate that to a percentage, Bitcoin accounts for only 0.2% of total global wealth currently. That's a tiny fraction, a tiny sliver of its total addressable market currently. Right? If Bitcoin were to take over a large chunk of this market, it still has very significant room to grow. River, they have estimated that Bitcoin's total addressable market is 225 trillion, assuming a 50% market share of store value assets. So if Bitcoin were to take over 50% of this total market share of store value assets, the total addressable market would be $225 trillion currently. So Bitcoin being a $2 trillion market cap, it could grow if it realizes this full potential of this total addressable market of 225 trillion. It still has 100 times bigger that it could get to reach its total addressable market. Now, will that happen? Well, we'll see. But if you just look at this at a high level and think about which direction Bitcoin could go and how much it could still grow, there's a very good argument that we are still very early to Bitcoin. But let's take a look at some other data that could back that up. Still looking at this River report, we're going to go through the global Bitcoin adoption section here, and they've stated that global Bitcoin adoption is at 3% currently. How did they come to that? Let's see. So Bitcoin adoption is just beginning, they say. Here's Bitcoin adoption's path until it would reach 100%, and we're at a 3% adoption rate globally currently. That's equivalent to the adoption rate of online banking in 1996, social media in 2005, or the internet in 1990. So if you just look at price alone, you're like, wow, one Bitcoin's 97,000. But then you look at this and you're like, oh, owning Buying Bitcoin right now is the same as adopting the internet in 1990. I don't know about you, but that is pretty early if you ask me. Another important thing to look at is how much capital institutions have allocated to Bitcoin currently. So if we just look at US investment advisor money and their allocations right now, US investment advisors currently have a net Bitcoin allocation of just 0.006%. So out of the total $128 trillion of US investment advisor money, the allocations are as follows: stocks 53%, corporate bonds 12.5%, US government bonds 10%, foreign government bonds 2.3%, cash 4.7%, alternatives 17.6%, and then we have again the tiny little square of Bitcoin at 0.006%. What about public companies? How many have started buying Bitcoin? As of this post on March 17, 2025, by River as well, 80 public companies are now buying Bitcoin. As of 2 years ago, that was just 33. And they proposed the question, 2 years from now, what will that number be? Well, how many? Let's just get an idea for how many that is out of the total public companies worldwide. So, if we estimate the total number of public companies in the world by just looking at the amount of holdings that Vanguard's total stock ETF has, VT disclosed total holdings of 9,769 in their most recent report. So 88 companies, 88 public companies that own Bitcoin out of 9,769 is only 0.09%. So only 0.09% of public companies have started buying Bitcoin. That's pretty low. If we look at other data that is claimed as many as 48,000 public companies worldwide, I don't know exactly where this comes from, but 88 out of 48,000 is just 0.02%. Either way that you look at it, it's a tiny fraction of the total number of public companies that have decided to start buying Bitcoin. And there's a ton of capital that is still sitting on these public companies' balance sheets that could be put into Bitcoin in the future. So this backs up the point of how early are we to Bitcoin actually? So if I told you that you could actually beat 99.9% of public companies to Bitcoin by buying today, would you feel like you're too late? After considering all that, you probably don't feel like you're too late to Bitcoin, and I would agree with you. We'll see how it plays out. There's obviously no guarantees, but I think if you started allocating to Bitcoin today, you would still be early. If you'd like our help with your Bitcoin allocation, whether it's just getting started, you're getting off zero, or you already have a large allocation to Bitcoin and you're thinking about what should it be in the future, we can help you come to that conclusion from a holistic financial planning perspective. We're financial planners for Bitcoiners because we are Bitcoiners ourselves. You can check out our services at strongwealth.net and schedule a free discovery call if you'd like to learn more. But I hope that gives you a good idea of whether or not you're early or late to Bitcoin at this point.